for more topical discussion, I'm now joined by Federal Liberal Vice President Tina McQueen. Tina, I just want to pick up on this last segment. The government has announced a funding cut to the veteran support group Soldier On. Now, that's a group that helps veterans transition back into the community. It's a hugely important and a really, really good organisation. But one of Australia's greatest business people and most generous philanthropists has stepped in to fill the breach. What are you going to tell me about that?
Oh, look, what Mrs. Reinhardt was absolutely devastated when she heard the funding cut to Soldier On. And Cory, I can tell you and the viewers, in less than a week, Mrs. Reinhardt organised a private lunch at one of her homes for some people that really, friends of hers that support defence people, and in that time raised $1.2 million. She's also insisted that these funds go directly to the soldiers, you know, not dispersed in organisational costs. Like, it was a wonderful gesture, remarkably done. There's no greater support of Defence Force than Mrs. Reinhardt, and she's done something about this when she heard of the cut. A remarkable effort, really, Cory. She asked for no thanks and little recognition. She doesn't get any, but I think it's important to know there are some good people in Australia that stand up and actually put their hands in the pocket for those that have fought for our country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say, this is a philanthropist. Gina Reinhardt makes sure the money goes to the people directly affected, the soldiers in this case, but in sport, she's the largest sponsor of, I think, Olympic sport in the country. Make sure it goes to the athletes to give them a fair crack at it, and I think that is wonderful.
Yeah.
But her name has also come up this week.
Yeah, and I was just going to say an incredibly generous gesture, Cory, and, you know, a big thanks to her friends to support her in doing this. Yeah.
Her name came up. I was in Sydney this week and I was staying at a hotel, and it was the same one where the Indian Prime Minister was staying. So I followed that visit, and I note that Gina Reinhardt met with him. Now, what's the significance of the relationship between Australia's richest person and the leader of the world's most populous nation, Tina?
Well, Mrs. Reinhardt thinks there's great trade deals to be done between India and Australia. It's a very exciting time. I believe some Indian officials are out looking at perhaps doing a partnership with some lithium mining with Mrs. Reinhardt's companies. Look, you know, the only hindrance, and I mean, the Prime Minister made a big deal side by side with Prime Minister Modi, but, you know, he's hindering, his policies are hindering a lot of these export deals, Cory. So it's such a shame, but Mrs. Reinhardt has a great respect for Prime Minister Modi, and at the same time he acknowledges and respects the work she does for Australian companies.
All right, Tina, I'm going to test you here about whether you have respect for this view. There was a story in The Australian this weekend that Tasmanian Coalition MP Bridget Archer said, what I got to say, a lot of people are thinking, the federal Liberals are unelectable in their current form. Is she right, Tina?
Well, she's wrong, because she states that they're unelectable because they're too far to the right, Cory. They need to be more centre and, you know, a little bit left of centre. And look, I think she's going to have big problems with her pre-selections in Tasmania. There's a lot of good, strong Conservatives that like what Dutton's doing and want to support him. And I think they see her as a bit of flamethrower and dissident, and would prefer a member that supports the leader of the party at the moment, who's putting up a really good fight.
Yeah, I think Peter Dutton is actually finding his mojo, and he's going to score some runs against the government coming up. All right, I'm going to leave you with this one, Tina. We've got Australia's first cryogenic lab that's opened apparently this week. It's for people who want to preserve their brains for the future. Now, I have to tell you, it doesn't have much appeal to me, but what about you? Are you willing to be frozen to come back with your genius and insights in a couple of centuries' time?
I certainly don't want this body frozen, let me tell you, Cory. The brain, no, leave it alone. It goes with me, Cory. It's buried with me. Sadly, no, they're not going to get to freeze this brilliant mind I have.
Hopefully it's going to be with us for a very long time to come. Tina McQueen, thank you very much for joining me on Bernardi tonight. Really appreciate your company.